My name is Ed Carmody. I'm the chairperson for the Operations Executive Group. This panel discussion is being sponsored by the Operations Executives Group and the Technology Executives Group. I'm going to introduce the other members very quickly. Eleanor, do you want to say hello?
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to some dynamic discussion.
Eleanor is the co-chair on the Operations Executives. Mitch Stievelman is out there somewhere. Mitch, you want to say hello?
I'm hiding over here.
There you are.
Just a quick note, we're going to be sending out our notice about the upcoming TechX event for the end of October. Hope you can all make it.
Excellent. Thank you. And Bob Merkel is also the co-chair for the Technology Executives. Bob, you want to say hi?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's meeting. And the TechX event will be October 28th. So please hold that date on your calendar. We have some very interesting speakers on innovation and related and managing in the current environment.
Thank you, Bob. Our panel discussion is an update on COVID-19 from an operations perspective. For those of you that were fortunate enough to join our panelists, we had an initial COVID-19 perspective from in mid-May from the panelists on manufacturing operations. This is an opportunity to kind of get updated insights there. Before I turn it over to AJ Yoshi, who will be the moderator for tonight, I want to first take a minute and thank the Beacon sponsors, PMA, Tryon, Marshall McLennan Agency, Penn State Great Valley, Prime Point, Tonbo Visual Promotions, Bailey Brand Consulting, and Focal Points Coaching and Training. I want to thank them. They make this possible. They keep it free, and I don't think we'd be here without them. So from just a meeting logistics perspective, most of you are muted already. If not, could you please mute yourselves so that we don't get any background noise, dogs barking, those kind of things. If you want to speak, when we get to appropriate question time, you can press and hold the space bar to speak. That will kind of flip you over to speaking, and when you release the space bar, you go back on mute. As questions come up during that, what we're asking is that we send the questions via chat. Eleanor will be collecting and grouping those questions and feeding them over to AJ as appropriate during the discussion or at the end. Since we have 1 hour, we've got some ground to cover. We do want to make it dynamic and interactive. We've got some questions for prepared for the panelists, and I think it'll be a lively discussion. So without being any further delay in getting to the real meat of the content, I want to introduce AJ Yoshi. AJ is a partner at Empirical Consulting Solutions, if I got the name correctly, AJ.
Correct.
I'll let you introduce yourself, introduce the speakers, and kick this off. So thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks to everyone for joining. This is part 2 of a very relevant discussion. And let me just go back where we were back in May when we had talked about this first. We had more questions than we had answers to. And the pandemic had just hit us a few months ago. Today, things have moved on. More things are certain than they were before, but I still think there's quite a bit of uncertainty. If you think about general state of economy has improved. Unemployment reached a peak sometime in June, July, and has started coming down. I think we went from mid 14, 15%. We're down at 8% now. And manufacturing in particular has been certainly impacted more heavily than many other industries. And we found that this was an interesting discussion even when we talked about it back in May. But by popular appeal, we have decided to do a follow-up on this. So to give you some quick background, these are the same panelists we had for those of you who couldn't join us, and all of them have returned. So our objective here would be to get a renewed perspective on where things stand today and how the future looks, more importantly, from today's standpoint. So our panelists, before I introduce them, actually are a diverse set. And they go from a business owner, sales and marketing specialist, operations specialist, and human resources. We felt this was very important to continue on to get a broad view, with this discussion. So let me kick off. And first, I want to thank all the panelists who have joined us. And let me introduce the panelists. First, I will introduce Bill Morrow. Bill, thank you for being on the panel.
Thanks, AJ. Thanks for having me.
Bill is managing partner at ECS, where he oversees the sales and marketing group, which provides guidance and execution to both small and mid-sized companies. Prior to joining ECS, Bill ran sales and marketing teams for Regis, Rentokil, and Lakeshore Learning. Next, we have Bud. Bud, thank you for being on the panel.
Nice to be here, AJ.
All right. Bud is a strategic manufacturing professional with 43 years of experience, including 15 years with a small division of J&J, where he started as a machinist and worked up to director of materials. He has devoted the last 26 plus years as vice president of the EF Precision Group, a consultative manufacturing company that provides CNC machining, complete build assembly, and engineering services. They focus on serving aerospace, medical, semiconductor, and the commercial industries. Next, we have Newell. Newell, thank you for being on the panel.
Thanks for having me, AJ.
Newell works with small to mid-sized industrial operations to drive sustainable operating performance improvements. He does this by formulating strategy and leading or supportive tactical initiatives. And we also have Rob Hoyle. Rob, thank you for being on the panel.
AJ, thanks for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Rob is the CEO and founder of GTS Scientific, an executive search firm based in Philadelphia. GTS Scientific provides talent acquisition services to the life sciences, engineering, specialty chemical, food and beverage, and technology industries, with over 150 clients throughout the US, UK, Canada, and India. Rob is a subject matter expert in creating, implementing, and optimizing talent acquisition processes and leading and developing high performance and recruiting teams. So let's kick this discussion off asking probably one of the most relevant topics today. I'll start off with Bud. Bud, what has changed for you since those early days of the pandemic when we spoke before?
Change. For us, it's just been a myriad of changes. We got very successful. We've been fortunate and blessed to be able to get through to where we are today with our business ramping up. So we've learned how to adapt. I think we've learned that our relationships, how important they are to our business. Our networking skills have to improve because you no longer have somebody in front of you. So you kind of rely a little bit more on what you're doing face to face on a Zoom, or trying to dial down your emails so that they become a little bit more personal and not just directly business, because people can't read inflection. They can't see your facial tones. They may not hear your voice go up or down with whether you're happy, sad, or, you're angry. And sometimes I think, if you keep the positivity going in everything that you do, then the people that you're talking to, because you don't know the positions that they're in, I think what it's done is kind of made our, at least in my small world, in the manufacturing area around here, everybody's become a lot more positive and maybe even a little bit more human that we sometimes lose because we're so focused and inside our business. So I've been really pleased to see that there's been a lot more camaraderie. There's been a lot more conversation. Phone calls have started again versus emails. So our business has changed. It needs to lighten up a little bit because it's been so intense for so long. And we all have to remember that if you don't know what the person that you're talking to or dealing with, what problems they have, because it's very difficult to share and not become emotional. So if you start out your conversations differently, and you stay in an upbeat fashion, you'll find that everybody will respect and come back to you in the same way. So that's been our biggest change and our biggest thing that we've had to handle with our people. 95 different personalities. So, you know, you have to go around. I mean, I'm probably around 5 or 6 times more than I ever was, making sure that you're just going around and saying good morning. And the little things like that seem to go a little bit longer than they used to. So yeah, positivity, keeping that up and making sure that everybody is kind of grooving. And if not, then I think it's all our responsibilities to make sure that we pick that person up.
All right. That's a true test of leadership. Thank you. Bill, what about from your perspective? You see clients across different industries, a lot of manufacturers. How do you see the world has shifted?
Well, I think in May, we recognized the fact that marketing and sales was going to change and change dramatically. And we had already started to see some of that, and we had engaged with a few clients. And since then, we've engaged with at least 20 new clients and working with them across many different manufacturing and industrials. And what we're seeing is a real demand by clients to interact, and they still want to interact with you, and they want to interact with these manufacturers. It's just been a bit difficult for them to figure out how to do that. And the ones that have, we saw a client of ours in Tennessee, that $30 million manufacturer who put a great webinar together, interacted with their clientele, and closed over $2 million in 24 hours in new business because of that. But to Bud's point, Bud, I think, makes a really good point there. It really is being human and connecting with people with what they need today. It's not this pie in the sky. It's really looking at and looking at how to engage and help your clients where they're at today in a human way. And the ones that are doing that and doing that digitally and figuring some things out and doing things differently have really made an impact.
All right. It's many common themes there. And Rob, switching over to you on the recruiting side, on human resource side, what are you seeing different now?
I think one of the biggest changes is some of the fear that companies were having early on about not being able to be productive and not being able to add value to the team and really be able to pivot. Some of that fear has gone because a lot of our clients have figured out the way to do it. So where, like in Bill's world, traditionally sales folks would be flying around the country and doing sales that way. They pivot and they have their teams doing it virtually now. And, their marketing programs have changed. And, that's been the biggest change. And I think, a lot of it's going to be in a positive way, is that, companies have learned that they can pivot and that they can move forward in a positive way. But, overall, the way the business used to be, may come back at some point, but they can still be positive. And, from our perspective, early on there, our whole team was working virtually. And then we found out we could be productive and also they would have the ability to work completely remotely if they wanted to. But by the end of June, they were all begging to come back in the office. And as soon as the county allowed us, we started bringing team members in a couple days a week. So that was a big change and it's been really positive for us.
Yeah. Working from home isn't what it's all cracked up to be, I guess.
Yeah, everybody's begging for that human interaction.
And to be away from the kids. Moving over to Newell. Newell, you work with clients, you're a problem solver. So what are the top manufacturing challenges that you have seen from your vantage point, say in the past 3 months? And to also follow that as what kind of solutions are you seeing out there?
Well, I would guess one thing it's interesting, a little bit of a dichotomy from what Rob mentioned. Companies, I think, have abated their level of fear that they've been able to get something done. But what I don't see having abated is some of the worker fear. And I think a lot of the companies that I work with have had to expend a tremendous amount of resources trying to help employees get past their concerns or put
mitigation in place that helps them feel a little bit more secure. Another one is managing team processes. That certainly isn't brand new, but that has continued to be the case. A lot of companies in manufacturing, you look at, for example, meat packing plants and places where you have to have a group of people working together. That's continued to be an issue, figuring out how to manage those processes and keep people safe. And Zoe, if you could pull up the slide, the first slide, or the child care slide. One that I think has become a much bigger issue for manufacturers is getting workers to come into work when they have childcare issues. And just to illustrate how significant that is, this particular graphic is from a Wall Street Journal article called "Factory Workers Stay Home to Watch Their Children." And the data here is from the Philadelphia Federal Reserve Beige Book that was just issued, I believe, September 2nd. And they said that as part of their questionnaire, manufacturers in the region, how many said that lack of child care was an impediment to hiring or recalling workers? In July, it was under 20%. In August, it was over 45% of manufacturers said they're having that problem. So for manufacturing specifically, it's the availability of childcare. What do I see people doing about that? And Zoe, you can take that one down. I think everybody's seen that. Thank you. A number of companies have started to provide on-site child care to some of their employees. An example is Toyota in Georgetown, Kentucky. They started a virtual learning center and have employees bringing their children into a Toyota-sponsored daycare. Another company, Weinberg Machining, 35 of the employees with kids just banded together and hired somebody to hang out in the conference room all day and watch their children. So there's kind of an ad hoc approach. I know my son has his own business, so he's very fortunate to do so. Takes his 13-year-old son to work every day, sets him up at a desk, and lets him do schoolwork. So, I think this is going to be an ongoing problem, and I think more and more companies are going to have to figure out how to help employees deal with that.
Rob, I'm kind of curious to hear your view on this topic that Newell has brought up with employees and kind of that flexibility with childcare.
Yeah, it's definitely a really serious issue in general, and even myself, I was dealing with it today. Bringing my 6-year-old to first grade for the first day of on-site, and having to get him home, and then get a babysitter because there's no after school care and things like this. But it's definitely a continued challenge, and I think a lot of that is going to be on the manufacturing floor side of it. When we're talking about workers, whether they be hourly or union work, you're going to see more of that, I think. But yeah, it's definitely a continued problem in general.
Okay.
I have colleagues that have said retired teachers are coming out of retirement, and learning pods are setting up in neighborhoods so that a recent college grad that didn't find a landing job is finding a learning pad, and they're going to different locations to group them. So I think we have to be creative.
You have to, you have to be creative, and it's like, this was supposed to be the year that I didn't have to pay for daycare for that one, right? But now I do, and I don't know how most of America is able to handle that challenge when they have to pay for additional childcare for their kids just to go to work. It's a pretty serious issue.
It is.
You talk about schools in a lot of areas. The schools are not going to have live classes, at least, here at the beginning of the school year. So an awful lot of folks that were kind of banking on kids of school age, at least going back to school from, 8 to 3 or whatever the times were, a lot of folks aren't going to have that as an option. So there's quite a few challenges, and I think this is going to go on for a while.
Yeah. So
superintendents across the state have regional meetings. I'm a former school board member, and they are trying, but no one has the perfect answer. And there are so many different concerns. There's the hallways, the school buses, the lunches, Do you split them? Do you go AM? Do you do PM? Do you merge? Do you blend it? I mean, the list just goes on and on. So they are working on it diligently.
Great point. I wanted to switch over to Bill now and get his sense for what does clients see as the big challenges that they have? What's stopping them from growing? Where do they get stuck?
Yeah, I mean, probably just adding on to what Newell and Rob spoke about, it's people. I have multiple manufacturing companies that we work with that have told us they've got 20, 30, 40 open positions, and some of them claim people don't want to work anymore today, but I think many of them do have childcare issues or maybe a lack of skill set and audience. I think we all, and a lot of them anticipated to have a larger pool to choose from when the pandemic struck, and they thought they'd be able to solve some of their problems, but we're not seeing that, where we're seeing still many of them having openings, and some of them have increased in openings because one of my food manufacturers, for instance, has gone from 150 to 250 employees, and he's had to add 100 folks and has only been able to fill about half of those roles because of a lack of people. It's really coming down to a human capital problem.
AJ, I just wanted to chime in on that for 1 second here as well.
Sure.
One of the things that we actually are not seeing that I thought we were really going to start seeing was candidates are actually taking new jobs. We've seen a big trend, and this is a lot in life science, but they are moving. You know, early on we had a few candidates that said, I'm not going to move in the middle of this. But I think people realize now, you know, it's going to be here to stay for a while. So if I'm going to make a move upward in my career, I can still do that. And that's a very, you know, promising thing, you know, for companies to find talent.
Right. So some things haven't really changed as drastically as we would have thought a few months back. So that's good to hear. Bud, I thought we lost Bud for a second. Is he still there? Bud, you still there? All right.
I am here.
Oh, you are. Okay. I saw your iPhone pop up and, you know.
Technology.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about the challenges, and, you know, you talked about the human aspect of things, but just overall, what are you seeing as the big roadblocks that you're facing today?
It's for us, it's the supply chain. They're not able to react like we are. So we've put a lot of pressure on several of our suppliers who are 20, 30-year suppliers, come to find that because they're still around and they're still active and they're still working hard, that other people are using them more, which has taken away some of our capacity. So, you know, we've been spoiled for a long time and we were using some great companies. So now we're having the challenges to find other suppliers that can do the same thing. So that has been probably our number 2 challenge is getting the supply base back in line, getting people that understand what our quality is all about. Actually, we would send our inspectors or our QA manager out to go look. And we've actually found a couple things that we can do now. So even by FaceTiming, trying to keep with the technology, we can have somebody take us through their shop. We're actually having them go through their QMS manual, and instead of having to take a whole picture of it or just go through it, so we can still ask our questions. And again, it comes back down to the human part of this. We want to be there, shake hands, and actually look. Because sometimes you walk in a building, you get a smell and everything's fine, and you get another smell and everything's not good. You don't get that, you know, from the office, but it's working, and it's just another challenge. It's just a small bump in the road that you got to get through. And then we've also assisted our suppliers who are having some log jams, and we're finding them some help in different manners. So either it's with people, we've had some people that are interested in a night shift that they didn't expect to have available. So we've actually matched them up. So we're trying to do the right thing and still make sure that our business is moving forward.
Interesting. Do you see some of these, you talked about virtual inspection, for example, do you see that as being long lasting? I mean, in the future where we see this, pandemic is behind us, do you think we're going to take all this with us?
I think that we'll take some of it with us, but the other thing about this is it's actually creating a stronger bond, because now you're seeing how they're actually doing things. So when we ask for them to show us inspection, never thought about it before, but now you can actually let them show what they're doing and how they're doing it, and we can show them what we're doing on our machine. So now we have them virtually connecting and saying, oh, that's what you meant by doing that. Oh, I can use that tool and get inside that area. It's easier. There's less there's more conversation, but there's actually show and tell. And
right.
It's, again, that is a building relationship. In our business, 99% of our business is relationships. So now I have my QA guys talking to guys that are technically adept like they are, that they wouldn't normally talk to, but maybe by phone or sending prints back and forth. They can show them the print. They can show them where they're doing it. They can go over to the machine. They can take them with them and have that conversation on a very high technical level, and yet they're showing them. So they're actually, it's just like you're working hand in hand. So yes, I think it's going to stay, but I also think it will cut down some of the time. This will cut some lag time down, because now this trust issue is going to go away. It's going to be a full-on trust. I know you're doing exactly what we talked about. When they send the parts in and you measure them the same way, you can actually dial them up again and say, you know what, look, perfect, exactly what we need.
Right.
So our hopes are that it continues, because now the drive time is being cut down. So we're being more efficient, I think.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. Just an example, a friend of mine showed me, he'd taken his car out to an auto dealership, and now the dealership takes a video of what is wrong with the car. And this is becoming a lot more common. So that's excellent customer service. You see, there's not this gap between, of course, people can walk into the shop, but they can have a camera there and see what's wrong in the car. So I think there's many good examples there of successful customer service, actually. Newell, you and I chatted in the past about air quality in shops, and that was a big issue that you're seeing. Can you highlight that a little bit?
Sure. Zoe, if you could pop up that last slide, I'd appreciate that. The issue has really kind of evolved as the medical community has learned more about transmission methodology of the COVID virus. And particularly as there's been more emphasis on contaminated workspaces after a positively diagnosed person has been in the workplace for a period of time, we're now, it seems like, starting to arrive at a consensus that area can be contaminated for quite an extended number of hours. And what an awful lot of manufacturers struggle with is appropriate, not just ventilation, but also filtration within a manufacturing environment. And I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on that. And part of that is going to the fear that we touched on, that I think a lot of employees still feel. Improving the ventilation and the filtration is something that we can all do. And the only purpose of this slide is so I don't have to spell ASHRAE and NIOSH for everybody. You can see they really are legitimate acronyms. Zoe, you can take that one down whenever. Thank you very much. But those are two governmental agencies that provide a lot of technical guidance on how to provide appropriate ventilation and filtration in the workplace. Those two are both referenced by both OSHA and EPA regulations, much like OSHA might reference National Electrical Code or something, which isn't actually an OSHA publication but contains the technical standards. ASHRAE provides a lot of technical information and guidelines on how to make your building ventilation and air conditioning systems safer for employees. NIOSH provides a lot of information on specifically personal protective equipment and how employees can keep themselves safe in their work practices. So those are two really good resources. And by the way, for all the attendees, we'll be sending out a list of these links after the webinar, so don't feel you got to peck away on a keyboard to make a note of those.
Absolutely. We'll send it in our follow-up.
So Newell, does this, I have to ask, does this actually create opportunities for HVAC and other industries? Do you see that as something that we'll see some technical advances in, perhaps new products coming out?
What I expect more than anything is a rebranded effort, because a lot of the systems and tools that that are appropriate are already out there. There's already HEPA filtration units out there. There's already anemometers so you can measure airflow. You can calculate air turnover. I mean, I've done a lot with air quality, specifically in painting and finishing operations, where you do have to study the particulate matter, the airflow, calculate what you have to do for a turnover. You can get, all the appropriate fans, ducting, whether it be a local device or a building-wide system. A lot of that stuff's there. What I would expect a lot of people to do is take their old System 2000 and go, this is now a System COVID-19 2000, or whatever. But I think most of the equipment already exists. I do think it's going to be a huge growth opportunity, though, particularly when you consider how many more coronaviruses there are that we have yet to really be exposed to. But we have, between SARS and MERS and now COVID, seen, some 3 viruses so far that have done the animal to human jump. And who knows how many more that might happen with. Granted, we should be able to work through it and come up with a vaccine a little bit more quickly. But I think in general, there's going to be a lot more emphasis on setting up buildings with healthy ventilation and filtration. And by the way, in the construction industry, you're starting to see an awful lot of that, an awful lot of the use of the term smart buildings. They've expanded that. That term already existed, but now smart buildings, the term has been expanded to include ventilation and filtration, specifically to address virus level particulate.
Yeah, so now it's definitely one to watch for. If you recall, one of the comments that was made from our last panel was, wow, you're an optimistic bunch. And in the face of all the risks that we saw, there were still areas that we found that some industries are doing better. I actually wanted to start off with Rob on this one, because Rob sees, he's got a macro view on a lot of industries. Who do you see doing better than others based in September 2020?
Well, the obvious choice is life sciences, right? And any of the suppliers into the industry. Vaccines and antivirals are getting tons of funding flow right now. So that's, definitely been a big pickup. And, the life sciences industry actually is on track to do as much funding and mergers and acquisitions and deals as it did last year. So that's still going on, which is fantastic. But the other trend in it, and I mentioned this before, there was only talks about it back then, but it's actually happened, bringing back supply chain in the areas of generic drugs and APIs. A lot of the life-saving drugs that we need here in the U.S. that kind of had us in a really bad place early on when we didn't have the ability to manufacture it here because we've been doing it over in China or India or South America for 30 years. They did start to fund from a national level, from a government level, fund companies throughout the U.S. to bring API manufacturing and generics manufacturing back here. So there's a company, Flow, down in Maryland, that got a lot of funding for this. There's a company, AMRI, up in New York, and they're throughout the country. but they got a lot of funding for this as well. And we're already seeing that they're expanding U.S. operations, and they're going to be bringing a lot of that manufacturing back. So, that's been a really, really positive trend. And I think that that's going to be really big for us moving forward when we talk about unemployment. And, as long as we can have the proper training, which is, by the way, a huge issue that the U.S. as a whole needs to address. But as long as we can have the proper training and transition people from roles that they used to be in into these manufacturing jobs, which are typically high-paying jobs comparatively, that is, going to be possibly, hopefully, the future, and we'll just have to address the issues that come with it.
Yeah. So, Rob, one of the chat questions is this employment population for jobs, do you think it's a lack on the shop floor, administrative, professionally, technically? What are you saying?
Well, these aren't in the kind of advanced biologics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a situation where we're going to need, more folks from overseas that have some of the science and engineering skills that we may be short on. I see the shortage more on the manufacturing floor, the quality control folks. The shortage will be there, in my opinion. And the answer to the shortage, I think, is training. And, realizing that, yes, we're bringing back manufacturing, but the cost of that now it's going to hit somewhere, right? It's going to hit in the cost of what it takes to make the product. And it's also going to raise the hourly wages for those manufacturing employees. But then at the end of the day, we're going to have to talk about, the payer, right? The folks who are going to be taking these medications, it's going to be higher as well.
So cost pressures are a result throughout the chain.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that it will cost more to manufacture here, but will also create a lot more jobs.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, stability and resilience seems to be key here, especially when they made those reshoring decisions. I wanted to ask Bud, actually, on the same light, now from a manufacturing perspective. But if I understand, you serve quite a few different industries. So from that perspective, where do you see the bright spots compared to where we were before?
I still think medical is certainly a bright spot. They're going to have so many challenges ahead of them. They're going to have to come up with new new technologies, new intuitive stuff that people can use at home to maybe be able to take care of themselves or take care of the elderly or take care of their children. So I think the medical is going to just come up with a whole bunch of brand new innovations that's going to really rock us for the future. I think that's probably a 3 to 5 year run where we can really start seeing brand new products, brand new opportunities, more things that will help us from all different places. I believe aerospace will start picking up again because I think that they're solving their problems while they're down. So the hopes are that Boeing will kick back in again and start to really make a big splash again, because with them being down for a significant amount of time, it certainly has hurt the industry. But I believe that that'll come back. Defense will probably continue on its roll. Still building some inventories. There's brand new tanks that are coming, brand new submarines that are coming. The fighters and the aerospace are just incredible what's going on. So I think all these things are going to continue, and absolutely pharmaceutical. I mean, not only from just the chemist standpoint or the scientific standpoint, the equipment that's going to need to be built to be able to make new products, do new things that we haven't even seen yet. So I just think our technology is going to take a little bit more of a jump. I think some of our, I think more automation is going to come, and that scares people because sometimes automation seems to replace jobs, and what it does in the background, it creates jobs. So we have to get away from that thought process. Once again, bring the positivity into it and say, it's not taking away a job. It's creating jobs that are behind the scenes that are here to help us. So all we need to do is train people, bring them up to speed, give them more opportunities, which gives them the ability to make more money. So instead of having a cashier at a grocery store, if that person is able to get involved in building the product that's taking that place of the cashier, they need a higher tech person. It's a higher paying job. So some of that stuff is on us to grab it and make sure people understand it's not the downside, but also bring on more opportunities. And I still have high hopes that we're going to go in the right direction.
If I may jump in and just add one comment to Bud's point about automation, the other trend that we definitely see in specifically manufacturing and on the shop floor, but also some in distribution, is automation that doesn't replace an individual, just augments an individual. So, for example, automated picking systems that are either through VR or more AR, augmented reality, that guide an employee to where they have to pick something off the shelf. So it's not replacing somebody, but it's making an individual more productive. And I think a lot of that is probably less scary for people than we're putting a kiosk in and it's going to replace 7 employees. So,
yeah, that's
AJ, I got one for Bill.
sure.
Bill, if you would, with the seeming new raised concern about staff attitudes and concerns, do you see managers seeing them as a target market that they should be communicating with? Do you see communications increasing?
Yeah, we've seen communications increasing across the board. I think Rob and Bud have both talked about that a little bit so far, and we're seeing more and more communications. I think there's a great deal of fear in that area as well. What's too much? I think we saw the pendulum swing early on, and you guys probably out there have seen the same thing where people had too much communication, too much meetings, 3-4 times a day, gathering back everyone together to have just check-in times. And I think we're starting to see that normalize now. And we see that, again, not just in manufacturing, but heavily in manufacturing, but across the board. So, yeah, we're seeing that a lot.
Thank you.
Bill, just to your point there, the other thing I've noticed is that folks are getting really burned out on these Zoom calls. So kudos to AJ and Eleanor and the team here for getting 50 people out for this, because I've had 1 or 2 that have fell through that I attempted on my own here that fell short. So
Thank you.
I think it was because you're on the call, Rob.
Yeah, you made it happen.
no.
And we said 60 minutes. We want to cover the topics.
Yeah, hey, I actually had a question for Bill, and this was a burning issue before, and I think all of us are, on that same topic of, virtual communications and, the sales cycle. And manufacturer has always been a face-to-face, get to know your customers well, deep relationships type of a sale. But can't do that anymore. Tough to get on planes as much. And we were embarking on this journey back in May. How far do you see manufacturers have gotten? What are best practices right now?
I mean, Bud hit one right away. We've helped design and develop in a sales process a virtual walkthrough. You take your iPhone or your phone and you flip it around and you walk through the plant and chat with people. And Bud made a great point. It's effective. It really is. And it's an effective way to show potential customers how you do things and the way things work. I, just like any other sales process, would recommend that I've seen ones go really well and some go really poorly. Just make sure you take the time to go through it and map everything out, know what everyone's going to say, know not to do things during breaks so you're not seeing equipment work or people work, or maybe you do want it during breaks. So give that some thought and make sure that you think that through. But I've seen sales cycles, and this was one of those unknowns, right? What was it? Were they going to go longer? I've seen them actually shrink in a lot of manufacturers where customers have a need. And again, Bud, picking up some Bud said earlier, there's a need and there's people out there shopping. And one of my clients who's a plastic injection molder in New York, we went to market just 2 weeks ago with a message that, hey, we have capacity. And we sent out one message to 10 different big clients that they had. 6 of them got back to us right away and want to have conversations, people they've never talked to before. So there's a lot of opportunity if you're taking advantage of the tools and what's out there.
And if you're going to do that and you're going to walk through, it might not be a bad idea to record it if you're able to, because you might be able to put that onto your website and give you another bounce on your website.
Great point. I'm going to steal that, Bud, and use that.
All right.
Yeah, no, that's great. The last time when we spoke, going to Newell, you talked a lot about cost cutting and about how that was so flexibility and cost cutting were kind of two big themes that you were seeing on the floor. What are you seeing? What's worked in that term? Have costs really come down that much with all the added costs of keeping people separate?
There's been pressures going in both directions there. I think a lot of people have been surprised by some of the changes they were forced into actually having reduced costs. Like one good example is where processes have been redesigned that used to require, say, 4 employees in close proximity. The process gets redesigned and we only need 2 employees to pull it off, and they find we're actually able to do it more cost effectively. Another one that really scared us all at first was, oh, you got to have a whole cleaning crew there 7 times a day to clean up every time somebody exhales. A lot of that has been mitigated or pushed to the side. I think, and I'm not the expert, I'm just going by what I read, generally the consensus is it's much more difficult to get this particular virus from touching a surface that somebody else touched. And at least the companies I work with, I see a lot less emphasis on cleaning. So that's one cost that we saw go up early on and has been slowly mitigated. Another example of a cost that I think some companies are starting to back off of is, we've got to constantly take everybody's temperature. There have been a lot of articles recently about how that's really not a very good indicator. You get false positives, you wind up doing a lot of testing that you may not need to do, and a lot of people that do get sick don't have a fever to begin with, so you aren't necessarily catching a lot of folks. I've heard of a number of manufacturers that have backed off on that constantly taking and recording of temperatures. So in terms of cost reduction, like I say, some of the process redesign helps with costs. Another one that does is any automation that you implement to try to keep people separated. That can reduce material handling costs, can reduce the direct labor activity with handing material from one person to another. A lot of the remote control technology helps as well. So instead of having, say, 1 operator per, CNC lathe, maybe you have 1 operator attending to 4 lathes, but you have 1 person working remotely that's just monitoring all of them. So overall, the cost for things like that in a larger environment have come down a little bit just as a result of a focused effort to pull people apart.
Great point.
That's great. I was just kind of on that same topic. Actually, last time, Bud, you had mentioned about the separating of the workstations and some of the additional work that you had to do. And on top of that, we also talked about still being flexible enough to handle, to kind of work in a very compact manner, maintaining flexibility on the shop floor. How much of that have you been able to accomplish? Is it work completed yet, or is there still a lot more to be done to keep operations flexible?
So I think this is never ending. I think it's the work still needs to be done. I don't know where perfection is. The guys that are running machines, they have to have some autonomy. They have to be grown-ups and understand what the distances are and pay attention to that. And our guys are pretty good about it. We wipe down machines more frequently. The guys are keeping the masks on, which is, I got to give them credit because it's just not a fun piece of business. But we have made areas so that they're at least, actually in our shop, our machines are somewhere around 10 to 12 feet apart. But in some areas, they're very tight. They might be as many as close as 5 or 6 feet. So they obey them and they stay within their distances. And if they're going to get together, they need to collaborate, then they'll put their masks on. Assembly is a little bit harder because now you have people that are standing most of the time and they're moving. They're constantly moving product, moving materials. So they're pretty much wearing masks 100% of the time because they don't know what the next thing is, but the workstations and the separation are there. We've made all the PPE available to them. We keep them educated. We let them know where the hot spots are for travel. We expect everybody to, you got an average age of 53 years old here, 17, 18 years worth of tenure. This is a family. This is not just, a bunch of people that got put together a year ago or 3 months ago. Although we do have a lot new hires. We have actually 10 people that we've hired over the last 3 or 4 months. But we expect them to police themselves. We expect them to be cordial. We expect them to be respectful of everybody, because they all know that it's only one person away. One bad spot, one, going out to the carousing out in the bars, and, being out in the place that just puts them in a bad spot or a position they shouldn't be in. And they have to understand that they're making decisions for 95 people. Not to mention the belly buttons that are attached to the 95. Not to mention to suppliers and customers. So we've been very, very fortunate. And I'm going to say that they're doing a great job, because we've skipped around the bad spots of this so far. And I'll say so far because, we're trying to be vigilant. We're trying to be realistic. We understand that it's bothersome. So in respect, we take care of them on a different way. So we give them the hero bonuses every once in a while.
Good.
That's excellent. All right. What I want.
We have a general question
Yes.
about just what do you think the general outlook is for the balance of 2020? Bill, you got any thoughts on that one?
Boy, that's a loaded question.
Glad you got it.
Okay, I'll go right to Rob.
I do see things improving. We spent a lot of time in private equity, and private equity's been out of the game for a long time, and we're seeing them increase their due diligence, which we know are going to increase deals at the end of 2020 and then into 2021. I think you're going to see a continued slow uptick, as we've seen in most of the sectors that we follow or we're part of. And then we're going to be pretty optimistic. We're pretty bullish about 2021. I think you're going to see things continue to improve, not everywhere, obviously, but many of our customers and most of our customer base are, especially in the manufacturing side, are running really well and projecting really good 2021s.
Thank you.
Let's maybe see what the others have to say about the rest as well.
Hey, Rob.
I agree with Bill. We've been seeing much of the same, and I've also started to see, not a lot, but a few of in-person events, and more folks that are willing to go out for, maybe a lunch or, something social distancing outside. Golf outings seem to be back. I've got 3 or 4 of them lined up this fall. Even one happy hour they did was one of the groups over at the one of the incubators. So I'm seeing more of it. I think that the attitudes being positive is the key, and obviously, at this point in time, everybody needs to be safe and making sure they're making decisions that are responsible for themselves. But I am seeing more positive as we go into the fall here. So. I don't have the crystal ball, but hopefully it gets better.
Right.
Thank you.
Newell, you want to go?
Sure. I don't necessarily know that we'll see tons of big changes from the balance of 2020. I mean, we're kind of most of the way there at this point, but certainly the holiday season is spurring people like Amazon to be confident in their plans to hire many tens and even hundreds of thousands of new people. So they believe that the blip that we've seen isn't just a short-term thing, but they appear to believe it's going to continue at least through the Christmas season. So that's a good thing. And forgive me, I don't remember who made the comment about 2021. I think most people are prognosticating a pretty solid next year. So.
Yeah.
Bud, what's your take?
again, I'll stick with my positivity. I think everything's going to be, we're going to come out of this. We're going to be all right. The human spirit will pick us up and take us. I think we got some challenges in front of us. I know that the vaccines are very close. I'm on the Jefferson board, and there's just a lot of good stuff that seems to be coming. So I have a lot of hopes. And I think business-wise, from what we're hearing from our customers, they're expecting very, very good years with challenges. But I just see us rising above it. And if we have to stay with what we're doing for the next year, I think that we'll stay with what we're doing for the next year.
Great. So last time when we had this panel discussion, we took a poll of those who attended, and around 40% of people thought that recovery back to February 2020 levels would happen in less than 12 months. So that'll be by next May. About another 40% thought it would be between 1 to 2 years, and only 20% thought it would be more than 2 years. So, anyone's guess where we're going to be at the end. But I always felt we have got a very optimistic panel, and we have actually, I think the optimists seem to have won this one so far, at least, because there are a lot more doom and gloom projections if you just watch the news. So, one thing that's really important for operations executives is to be on time. And I promised everyone that we're not going to go past 6 o'clock. So on that note, Eleanor, is there any quick questions from the?
We hit most of the big ones. We got the general, just that manufacturing jobs don't require the college loans. So that might make it attractive for manufacturing in the country, but we still put a premium on college education. That was the only topic we really didn't discuss.
Great. That sounds good. For another discussion.
That'll be another day.
That'll be another day. I wanted to thank each of the panelists and also the organizers who have helped make this happen, and everyone who's attended. And with that, I will turn it back to Ed.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Wasn't sure because my speaker view didn't. AJ, thanks for another great moderated session. I want to thank the panelists as well. We would welcome any feedback that you guys can provide in terms of future topics along this line from a manufacturing perspective and operations perspective. And I want to thank the technology executives for joining us as well. So with that, I think we are still a few minutes ahead of time. So if there's any, I'll kind of open it up to any final questions or comments, and then we'll wrap up pretty quickly.
And we will be posting this, right, Zoe, on the website. And if there's any, put it in the chat. If there's anything else, we'll try to get back to you. Do you want to do a takeaway, Ed? Does each panelist want to do a takeaway?
Yeah, that'd be final thoughts, closing thoughts, maybe rapid fire around the each of the panelists. And I guess the question.
30 seconds.
What's that?
30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Yeah, 30, so rapid fire. We are now over 6 months into the pandemic and our response from an operations perspective. I'd love to get your quick views on what do you think the next 6 months hold for us? Let's go to Bud first.
Again, I'm going to stay on my positivity thing. I think make sure you're paying attention to the people that are working for you. Know who your assets are. Make sure that they understand everything and be cognizant of what's going on with them. So I think the business is going to support it's going to be there. We're going to keep everybody busy. I just think it's important to make sure we know who the asset or what the assets are in your company.
Thanks, Bud. Bill, over to you. Final thought.
I think we're at the beginning of this reshoring exercise that I think a lot of companies are undertaking, and we have a lot of unknowns. And I think the next 6 months is going to be a wild ride, and especially in manufacturing, and we'll see where we end up.
Awesome. Newell, you want to go next?
Sure. I echo Bud's positivity. I see manufacturing as a lot like farming. We just got to take our problems every day, figure out the best we can, do our best, and move on to the next problem. And it's very common sense, very, very down to earth, just like farming is. And so I believe, I'm very confident in American manufacturers to pull through this.
Turn the soil and reseed.
There you go.
That's great. All right, Rob, I'll give you kind of the last perspective there.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mirror everything everyone else has said, and to me, it's about being positive. If you can be safe. That's the biggest point. Follow trends and be ready to pivot. As long as companies are ready to pivot at a moment's notice. Don't plan to pivot, just pivot. It's going to be, the way of the future, I think.
Great. So from the Beacon organization, I want everyone to be safe, take care of yourself, take care of your people, and thanks for joining us.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.